world seems dark, but these darkening scenes, we as new members...
In spite of Uganda's relatively peaceful transition into independence, the country was not excluded from the political turmoil that spread over the continent in the early post-colonial period. Prime Minister Milton Obote suspended the constitution in 1966, and the following year he declared Uganda a republic and instated himself as president. Obote was soon overthrown in 1971 by one of his army generals, Idi Amin Dada. He further exacerbated the repressive nature of Uganda's governance with a spate of high-profile and civilian extrajudicial killings during his regime. This ensured that there was no freedom of speech or political discourse in the media and the arts. One example of Amin's government's no-nonsense approach towards the artists of the time is perhaps best exemplified by the murder of popular playwright and actor Byron Kawadwa after showcasing a Luganda language play titled Oluyimba lwa Wankoko, or Song of the Cock, perceived to be a political satire of Amin's Uganda at the Festival of Arts and Culture in Lagos in 1977. Amin had earlier in his regime expelled Uganda's Indian population from the country on the grounds of an economic war. At the time, the Indian community constituted a considerable chunk of Uganda's entrepreneurial class, with some of the early Ugandan cinemas among their business interests. Amin claimed the move was aimed at giving Uganda back to Ugandans. Like many of the other businesses handed out by Amin to his cronies and associates, the cinemas were run into the ground, and the low film audience numbers owing to low incomes and insecurity in the country did not help. Amin was deposed in 1979 with the help of the Tanzanian forces. In the country's first election held in 1980, Milton Obote won a second term in power, but the results of the election were rejected by his opponents. This sent Uganda into a 5-year protracted civil war in which almost all economic activity and development came to a halt. The Ugandan Bush War ended in 1986 when Yoweri Museveni came into power with the National Resistance Army, now operating as a state party called the National Resistance Movement. The suppression of free speech and thought of civilians led to a number of members of the young nation's intellectual class fleeing the country, with many of them never returning. A key example of this is the heralded author Okot Pibitek, whose epic poem Song of Lawino is arguably Uganda's greatest literary export. A conscientious objector to the state of governance in Uganda, Okot Pibitek fled the country into neighboring Kenya in 1969. He returned shortly before his death in 1982. Okot Pibitek symbolizes the devastating effect of the artistic and creative brain drain in these very tumultuous years of Uganda's history. Key to this transition were a group of innovative employees of Uganda Television, Mike Makamazibu, George Sengendo, and Faustin Misamvu. The trio directed and produced early recorded theatre shows on the UTV soundstage in the late 80s. They went on to direct the majority of the early episodes of the groundbreaking show, That's Life Mwatu. The show, produced by the legendary theatre group The Ebonies, in conjunction with VCL Studios, was a hit. It became iconic in the country for its humorous and at times salacious dissection of Ugandan family life and contemporary culture. Faustin Misamvu directed It's Not Easy and also co-directed Adopted Twins alongside Zimbabwean director John Riba. With theatre re-establishing itself as a dominant form of performance art in the early Museveni years, practitioners who largely operated in the countryside were able to establish themselves and create vibrant followings of their own. Most prominent amongst them would be Winko Wakaritundu. Based in Western Uganda with the Chinimba drum actors, he was able to popularize local entertainment by recording and proliferating plays shot on location with members of his theatre group. One of the more memorable recurring characters he played in his productions was the character of Rutamirika, who became a household name for his comedic antics. Although there was an increase in the inflow of Hollywood and Chinese cinema through VHS and later DVD in the country between the 90s and early 2000s, there was an increasing demand for local content. This led to the rapid expansion of Uganda's media space, with local TV stations like the now defunct Wava Broadcasting Services or WBS causing a wave of contemporary visual media to permeate the fabric of Ugandan society. Ugandan musicians were quick to adapt to the expansion of the local radio and television scene to their advantage, with music videos quickly being integrated into the local music production and marketing model. Clearcut and Juliana's All I Wanna Know, shot by paparazzi, is still considered a groundbreaking work of Ugandan pop culture. This group of videographers consisted of names like Twist Kanyike, Mustaq Abdallah, and Donald Mugisha, also known as Dedak. Music producer Steve Jean is also cited as highly influential in the modernizing of Uganda's show business scene. By the early 2000s, filmmaking was starting to get democratized due to access to much cheaper and user-friendly production technology. There was also a desire to offset the cultural imperialism of Hollywood, which dominated the urban cinemas and local vibandas.